Hey, my name is Donald King. I recently posted a video on YouTube called The Systemic Logic of Natural Order. Prior to that, I posted a video on YouTube called The True Significance of Prime Numbers. In these videos, we were discussing the quantitative values and intellectually correlating themes that allow for existence. Well, this video installment is going to be dealing with universal math. It's going to be dealing with natural order of quantitative value. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into the bulk of the material here. Please feel free to ask questions. I'm here to answer as many as I can, as many as I'll be afforded the opportunity to. So I want you to understand this. Again, my job is not to tell you what to believe. It is to instead share with you what's been shared with me, and give you the opportunity to tune to it as you see fit. You can either accept it and explore it, or you can refute it and go on pursuing whatever makes sense to you. But I just want to go ahead and say that up front. So, on to the show. Parasites, they have a way of thinking, a mode of processing information that doesn't align with natural order. The concepts of acquisition and ownership are parasitic in nature. Parasites are incomplete or structurally lacking organisms. Parasites survive by attaching themselves to and exploiting the energy conversion cycles of other life forms. Parasites exploit energy conversion cycles in one of two ways. First, they restructure the bodily context of the host organism that they attach to. Second, they reformat the operating logic of the host organism that they attach to so as to not be detected. A parasite's primary operating logic is set to consumption. It's lacking structurally, and it's hoping to become whole through consumption. This operating logic translates into three thought processes. The primary thought process is called perception. The two auxiliary thought processes are called ownership and posturing. In this film, we're going to address the intellectual mechanics of ownership, and we're going to specifically focus on a derivative concept called accumulation and the impact that it makes on our interpretation of quantitative values. The root paradigms of ownership are called acquisition and accumulation. Acquisition being or meaning to obtain, and accumulation meaning to amass. Quantitative values. Quantitative values are what we refer to as numbers. Intellectually, they manifest as contextual space holders, or designated values that occupy respective points in observable logic or order for temporal, spatial, or intellectual contexts. Quantitative values are used to form mapping systems. They are temporal or spatial space holders. Quantitative values are not meant to be interpreted cumulatively. To accumulate is to amass. Regardless of context or application, at a certain point, mass becomes inefficient and difficult to wield or manipulate. Natural order operates by means of efficiency. Quantitative values are natural properties. They belong to natural order, and this means that they are meant to operate by means of efficiency as well. Like existence, existence being everything, including God, the structural building blocks that collectivize to form his body, the structural building blocks that collectivize to form our body, and the structural building block that the body of our God belongs to, numbers, or quantitative values, operate by the logic of scaled plane. This means that instead of growing cumulatively in size, numbers, or quantitative values, are meant to collapse into or fold into each other. So let's get into perception-based math, okay? Nature does not recognize or abide by variables, integers, equations, or fractions. Nature deals exclusively in whole, physical, or intellectual quantitative values. Nature does not recognize the value of zero. The number zero is a space holder, which is used to justify cumulative logic in quantitative values. Variables, integers, equations, fractions, and decimals are perception-based intellectual tools. Again, the paradigms of acquisition and accumulation, both being properties of perception, have distorted our comprehension of quantitative values. Quantitative values are meant to be used as intellectual navigating tools, not tools for reconciliation or justification. In other words, numbers are not supposed to be used for budgetary purposes. There are no variables. Everything in nature has a whole and authentic value. Perception based math attempts to impose cumulative logic onto properties that defy quantization. This causes men to pursue or value modes of thinking that can effectively apply to multiple, if not all, situations and or properties. Cumulative logic causes us to count wrong. Okay, the way we count now, numbers just keep getting larger and larger, more inefficient and cumbersome the further we progress away from zero. Okay, regardless of which direction we're moving. All of these perceptions have made mathematical computation cumbersome, inefficient, and difficult for most people to understand and comprehend. If you're not good in math now, it's not because you lack intelligence. It's instead because of the fact that most of it is cumbersome and incomprehensible. Most of the intellectual disciplines we employ to, reconcile mathematics are unnecessary. Um, and though many of these disciplines may seem fundamentally sound because they mimic the systemic logic of natural design, ultimately they lend themselves to erroneous thinking and intellectual teetering, mistakes, or confusion. Existence is made up of interlocking themes that fit together like puzzle pieces. All natural values have intellectually correlating themes. Numbers are an inaccurate depiction of quantitative values. All natural values double as intellectual themes. That is, observable modes or routes for energy reflection, conversion, absorption, and processing. What makes these themes or values intellectual in nature is the fact that they can be observed and processed through the natural cycle of cognition. In the video, The True Significance of Prime Numbers, I explained the themes for the values 1 through 7. In this video, we're going to map out the intellectual themes to 13, which represents or correlates with the intellectual faculty of completion. To varying degrees, all natural values embody or can be traced back to these core intellectual frameworks. But technically, all things begin with or are some variation of the values 1 through 7. All values, physical and non, are simply different expressions of systemic principles that govern, shape, mold, and deconstruct all of existence. The same principles that apply to matter also apply to light, energy, sound, and intellectual properties, but to varying degrees based on the scale of plane that they represent in relation to the point of perspective afforded to us on this scale plane of existence. The same principles that apply to matter also apply to music. A432 tuning. Nature deals exclusively in whole values. The perception of fractals is a property of the paradigm of ownership, by proxy, the cumulative paradigm. Our current system of music tunes middle A to 440 hertz. This causes many of the other musical notes we use to shift hertz counts in an effort to compensate. Many of the musical notes we use have shifted to hertz counts that rely on fractals as opposed to whole values. A432 tuning, that is for the most part, our comprehension of harmonic balance needs a little bit of tweaking. But A432 tuning allows for music to mirror the universal principle of whole value designation. The scale I used in the video, The True Significance of Prime Numbers, was as follows. In the video, The True Significance of Prime Numbers, I talk about relevant number groups. Relevant number groups are families of intellectual themes that encompass systemic principles for energy bonding, separating, progress, decay, and recycling. There are 7 relevant number groups, and those are called Sieve of 4 numbers, Sieve of 5 numbers, Sieve of 6 numbers, Sieve of 7 numbers, Sieve of 8 numbers, Sieve of 9 numbers, and Sieve of 13 numbers. Then in addition to that, we have prime numbers. The numbers 1, 2, and 3 are not prime numbers. They're what we'll refer to as core values. Prime numbers actually begin at 5. From the Hertz interval factorization, we pull the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 13. Again, remember, 7 is the premise. The numbers 1, 2, and 3 are not prime numbers. They're core values. As I understand it, this means that when we're looking at the factorization for the Hertz count intervals between notes in the A432 scale, we start counting relevant number groups at the number 4. The number 7 represents composition, or in this case, the whole natural values occupying the actual or relevant space. All of these number groups either outline or represent missing values in the prime number sieves. The even number groups, like 4, 6, and 8, outline and separate the prime number sieves, and the odd number groups intersect with the prime number sieves at certain points and intervals in their respective progressive states. In other words, the even number groups, they outline the prime number sieves, and the odd number groups, they intersect with or represent missing spaces in the prime number sieves. Prime numbers. Prime numbers are numbers that can only be divided evenly by themselves and the number 1. Within prime numbers, there are numbers that we refer to as superprimes. The superprimes, as I understand them, are the numbers 7 and 13. Also, another superprime is the number 5, but for what we're covering in this video, we're going to focus on the numbers 7 and 13. Again, all numbers have correlating intellectual themes. The number 7 represents composition, and the number 13 represents completion. Prime numbers outline the natural sequential order for structural building blocks, or what we would refer to as DNA sequencing. In the video, The True Significance of Prime Numbers, I demonstrate this by writing out the numbers 1 through 7 and then aligning the numbers into columns. 7 digits per line, spanning from left to right, and then working downward. Arranging numbers in this order causes prime numbers to align with each other at about a 60-degree angle. There are 2 sieves of prime numbers, and we're going to call these sieves Sieve GR 528 and Sieve P 714. I named these sieves based on the colors that I used in the visual aids that I'll be demonstrating or showing to you here in a very short period of time. It doesn't really have a scientific basis. So far as I can tell, prime numbers adhere to the structural building block logic or format whenever we map out in column numbers to superprime or square root numbers based on superprime digits. For my example, or for the examples I'm going to be using DNA maps. That's what I call them, DNA maps to the number 7, DNA maps to the number 13, and then a DNA map to the number 49, just to show that, the logic remains consistent. Relevant numbers, prime numbers, and the math wheel. The math wheel basically demonstrates how energy travels in predetermined pathways when it adheres to the sequential logic of progressive quantitative value. This is an example of a natural calculator. I call this a math wheel. All relevant math is contained in the numbers 1 through 9. The circle, or the sphere, is the most common symmetrical shape in all of existence. If you put the numbers 1 through 9 around a circle, you have a calculator, plain and simple. It's literally been here the entire time. This is an example of calculator being used. Okay, so we're going to start with the wheel on the left. The wheel on the left is the sieve of 1. So we're going to start counting around. You see the 1 is circled. We're going to start counting around chronologically. We get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There is no such thing as 0. 0 does not exist. It's not a real number. So we get back to what would be 10, and it's 1. So 1 plus 10 becomes 1 plus 0 equals 1. We move around to 11. 1 plus 1 equals 2. We move around to 12. 1 plus 2 equals 3. We move around to 13. 1 plus 3 equals 4. And it continues on and on and on. We'll get back around to 19. 19 on this chart will be 1. Any number that has a 9 in it, any compound number that has a 9 in it, 9 automatically cancels out and you're left with the other number. That's the way that it works. So 1 plus 9 equals 10, which becomes 1 plus 0 equals 1. And then we move over to 20, which would be 2. 2 plus 0 equals 2. All right? So then 2 plus 4, so we get to 21. 21 becomes 2 plus 1, which equals 3. 22 becomes 2 plus 2, which equals 4, and so on. Okay, so let's take that same logic and apply it to the sieve of 8. All right? So if you look at the circle on the right, you'll see that the 8 is circled. Okay, so let's start counting the families of 8. We have 8, then we have 16, which is 1 plus 6 equals 7. Then we have 24, or 2 plus 4 equals 6. Then we have the number 5, or we have 32. 3 plus 2 equals 5. And then we have 40. Well, like I told you, the value of 0 does not exist, so we're only left with 4. Then, we can continue this logic all the way around, and it's going to continue into infinity. This is the natural way that we were meant to count numbers. We're not supposed to think of them cumulatively. They are meant to collapse into each other as values that add together to form a number, not the other way. Okay, so here's another example of how it works. Let's look at the top here. We have 5 plus 5 equals 10. 10 is broken down into 1 plus 0 equals 1. We have 9 plus 2, which equals 11, which then is broken down into 1 plus 1 equals 2. Then we have 8 plus 4 equals 12, and 12 becomes 1 plus 2 equals 3, and so on. So when we get into larger numbers, we can look at the example I used here. 2,683 becomes 2 plus 6 plus 8 plus 3, which equals 19, which then is broken down into 1 plus 9 equals 10, which then becomes 1 plus 0 equals 1. A larger number, like 86,279,474, is broken down into 47, which then becomes 4 plus 7, which then becomes 1 plus 1 equals 2. This is how math is meant to work. When we put relevant number groups and prime numbers into the math wheel, they produce 5 intellectual frameworks that demonstrate how energy travels. So we've already been over these number groups. We're going to refer to the pattern that they create as the circular logic. We'll refer to the sieves of 2 and 7 as emerald logic. And follow the arrows. We'll start with 2. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Follow that logic all the way around, collapsing values. Then we move over to 7. We have 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 42, and on into infinity. Next, we arrive at what I refer to as pyramid logic. That's equilateral triangles that form in the math wheel or calculator. So let's follow the logic of 3. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. Okay, and now let's move over to sieve of 6. We have 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, which is 3 plus 6 equals 9, and so on, into infinity. Finally, we arrive at what I refer to as the cluster of 9 points. As you'll see, 4 and 5 basically follow the same operating logic. They create the same pattern, except they move in opposite directions. Let's follow the logic of 4. There's 4, 8, 12, or 1 plus 2 equals 3, 16, 1 plus 6 equals 7, 20. And this pattern continues into infinity. And then if we move over to the sieve of 5, we'll see 5, 10. Remember, there's no such thing as 0. So it's 5, 1, 15, or 1 plus 5 equals 6, 20, 25, 2 plus 5 equals 7, 30, and so on. Okay? The same logic also applies to 13. So if you follow 13, 26, 39, the same pattern will repeat all the way around, as will with any number that is a compound number. Okay, so the sieve of 9. 9 is a self-contained number, okay? And this is the reason why it cancels out whenever it is in a compound number with any other number. It's self-contained. So look at it like this. 1 plus 8 equals 9. 2 plus 7 equals 9. 3 plus 6 equals 9. 4 plus 5 equals 9, so on and so forth. Okay, so 9 is a self-contained number, and that's why I have it circled over here. But also, there's another logic that applies here too. Follow the lines. 1 and 8 are connected. So we have 18, 27, 36, 45, 54, 63, 72, 81, and so on into infinity. As you'll notice, every number is paired with its reflective counterpart based on the number 9. All the number groups are aligned with their reflective counterparts. So 1, the opposite of 1, or what moves in the opposite direction of 1, is the series of 8. What moves in the opposite direction of 2 is series of 7. What moves in the opposite direction of 3 is series of 6. And what moves in the opposite direction of 4 is series of 5. So far as I've determined, there are 4 unique, or what I refer to as anomalous, energy groups. And they are Sieve GR528, Sieve P714, and the square root sieve, and I guess it would be the doubling circuit sieve. Those are all the unique sieves that I've identified at this point. I'm sure that there are others as well. Okay, so this image here represents Sieve GR528, Sieve P741, and the Sieve of 6, all interlinked or all working together at the same time. We're about to get into these concepts here in just a little bit. We're going to explore them in greater detail, but for now I just want to introduce this image. Okay, so we call this one here the square root sieve. The reason why is because if you trace the logic of the lines in here, it will take you through all of the square root numbers into infinity. So we can just go ahead and get started with that. We'll start with 1. 1 times 1 equals 1. 2 times 2 equals 4. 3 times 3 equals 9. 4 times 4 equals 16, which becomes 1 plus 6 equals 7. And you'll see that there's a little loop around down here at the bottom. Well, that's because 7 repeats twice. 5 times 5 is 25, which is 2 plus 5 equals 7. Then we get back around here to 6 times 6. 6 times 6 is 36, or 3 plus 6, which equals 9. And then 7 times 7 is 49. Any number that includes 9 automatically reverts to the number that isn't 9. So 9 just cancels out. And then 7 times 7, which will be back at 1, 7 times 7 is, 8 times 8 is 64. 6 plus 4 equals 10, which becomes 1 because there's no such thing as 0. And 9 times 9, it comes down here to 9. 9 times 9 equals 81. Well, 1 plus 8 equals 9, or 8 plus 1 equals 9, and then 10 times 10 is 100. And this pattern follows into infinity. So this is the square roots logic. All relevant computation is possible through this system of math. Recently, a gentleman by the name of Marco Rodin happened across this phenomenon as well. He discovered what he refers to as, I believe, God's fingerprint, or doubling circuit. This is an example of his discovery. Basically, he did the exact same thing. He arranged the numbers 1 through 9 around a circle and noticed a pattern that emerged when he used lines to follow or trace the mathematical doubling logic. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, etc. What he actually discovered was a calculator. I call it a math wheel. Not to detract from his discovery, but as I understand it, the math wheel isn't supposed to be used for, doubling logic. It is meant to follow the systemic logic of natural order. So nothing in nature doubles perfectly, exponentially. It just doesn't happen. So, not to undermine his discovery, just what was shown to me has a different application than what was shown to him. So, yeah. For now, let's focus on the prime number sieves. We're going to do that by pulling up the DNA maps for the numbers 7, 13, and 49. And we're going to examine those right now. Okay, now that we've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to take all of the values that are in the prime number sieves and we're going to break down each number into its single digit expression using the math wheel. We'll start with DNA map 7. So the green sieve reads 5, 11, 17, 23, 29, 41, 47, 53, and so on. Okay? The purple or blue sieve, depending on how this shows up on your computer screen, reads 7, 13, 19, 31, 37, 43, 61, and so on. Okay, so basically let's break these numbers down. 5 is the first number. 11 becomes 2. 17 becomes 8. 23 becomes 5. 29 becomes 2 plus 9, which becomes 11, which becomes 1 plus 1 equals 2. 41 is 5. 53 is 8. So this is where the term 5 to 8 comes from. All right, and then let's move over to the blue or purple sieve, which however shows up on your computer screen. Well, we have 7, then we have 13. 13 becomes 1 plus 3, which equals 4. 19 becomes 1 plus 9, which equals 10, which is 1 plus 0, which equals 1. So 19 becomes 1. 31 becomes 4. And 37 becomes 1. And again, the missing values in here, the missing values in this particular sequence come from the odd number relevant groups that would be intersecting with the prime number sieve at this point. Again, we have intersecting values that are going to collide with the prime number sieves that are based on the odd number relevant groups. Okay? These intersecting values from the odd number relevant groups are part of the prime number sieve. These numbers, they belong in the sequence of prime numbers. So basically, if we take these numbers and we put them into the math wheel or the calculator, depending on how you want to label it or term it, whatever, they create their own reflective counterparts based on the number in the DNA sequence that it's mapped out to. Okay, so when we're examining DNA map 7, if we read down Sieve GR, it reads 52852. If we switch over to the next lane, it reads 8, 5, 2, 8, 5, 2, etc. So everything on this map, if we were to enter it into the math wheel, would be moving counterclockwise. 528, 528, and 852 are both moving counterclockwise, and the same thing would apply to Sieve P and to the Sieve of 6. Everything in this DNA map 7 moves counterclockwise. Okay, so when we're examining DNA map 13, if we read it down, we'll start with Sieve GR. It reads 582, 58, and then we switch over to the number 11, which becomes 2, and we continue to read down 582, 582. And if we switch over to Sieve P, we'll look at 714, 714, and these patterns continue throughout the entire DNA map. So if we're looking at it in the math wheel, 714 is moving clockwise, as well as 582, 582 is moving clockwise. The sieve of 6, which separates the prime number sieves, is also moving clockwise. When entered into the calculator, each of these sieves produce an equilateral triangle. What's more than that is if you combine the single digit values of Sieve GR528 and Sieve P714 and the Sieve of 6 numbers, you get Sieve G6, Sieve P3, and Sieve of 6 or Sieve SOS 9, which in sequence produce a compound progression of 693. 693, which is a repeating pattern of the theme of 6, spatial relevance. All right. These prime number sieves, in conjunction with the space holding sieves and the intersecting sieves of the odd number relevant groups, create what we refer to as eternal order. They are the structural building blocks that represent order and systemic logic for all of existence. Bodies inside of bodies, inside of bodies, inside of bodies. Again, the quantitative value for the number 13 is, or signifies, the concept or principle of completion. When we take DNA map 13 and make it three-dimensional, that is, form it into a cylinder and use three-dimensional maps to highlight or symbolize the quantitative values, this is essentially what it looks like. Pardon me there. I said maps. I meant to say use three-dimensional objects to highlight the quantitative values. This is what you come up with. So basically here I've used round wooden beads that I've colored in with marker to demonstrate properties belonging to Sieve GR, Sieve P, Sieve of 5, and Sieve of 7. Another important thing to take into consideration is the fact that the DNA sieves don't align perfectly when the map of 13 wraps around. Again, 13 signifies completion. As I mentioned earlier, the prime number sieves and the sieve of 6 create a compound progression of the number 693, which is in fact the repeating theme of the sieve of 6. 6 is equal to spatial relevance and shares or signifies the theme of eternal order. The numbers 1 and 13 are what some would refer to as alpha and omega. They are beginning and end. They overlap with one another. They are synonymous in this particular DNA map. Okay, so we've taken the DNA map of 1 to 13 that I made, and what I've done is I cut it out and I turned it into a cylinder. So we made it three-dimensional. It's become a three-dimensional thing. I'm going to bring it in a little bit closer here so you can see it. You'll notice that there are markings between 1 and 13, between 65 and 53, 91, and which number is this? This is 79, and also between 143 and 131, and finally between 169 and 157. The reason why I'm demonstrating this to you right now is because these actually, the prime number sieves from the, I guess from the column of 1 line up with the prime number sieves from the column of 13. Actually, what this means is that they're supposed to overlap. They don't necessarily collapse into each other. They represent completion. It's essentially the overlap of alpha and omega. And how we arrive at this is the fact that it's like, again, everything traces back to the sieve of 6. Okay? So when we're thinking in terms of the sieve of 6, you're going to notice that right here, I'm going to bring this a little bit closer. This gray line right here, that belongs to the sieve of 6. And then as you'll see, the gray line right here is it's displaced with the gray line right here. They look like they're about to line up, but for some reason they don't come short, and that's because, again, the column of 13 and the column of 1 are meant to overlap with each other. All right? Okay, now using a different model, what happens when we take this right here, the other one was contained. When we take this model right here and we take the sieve of 6 and we align it, what ends up happening is we cover over 13. 13 and 1 collapse into each other. So the count goes to 12, and then 13 represents 1. Well, the way that that actually translates is once you get back to, or once you get around to what would have been 13, 13 becomes a whole. It represents the cycle of completion. And that's essentially the way that that works. So, again, when we take all of these and we make it three dimensional, what you end up getting is this. So, yeah. Structural building blocks. That's DNA sequencing. It's all in numbers. It's all in universal themes. Basically, what we think we know to this stage in human development is officially irrelevant. Our technology is irrelevant. Our educative systems are officially irrelevant. I've done my best to explain these concepts to you in English. Okay, it's like intelligence and English don't always line up perfectly. So I'm sure that there are probably more succinct ways to express some of the concepts that I'm sharing with you right now. This still only represents a fraction of what I understand and what I can see. This isn't a monopoly. This is free information. I'm giving it to everybody. It's time for us to tune back to the original logic that you know, was programmed into us and stop using these external concepts to try and justify and make sense of the world because they're failing. They're all failing. Politics, government, education, all of these systems, especially religion, which is like, I guess, the parasite's primary weapon of choice against us, or its tool of choice against us. It's, all of these institutions are failing. And the reason why is because it's like they were all built from the wrong intellectual platforms. It's time for us to tune to what our authentic way. And that's essentially what I'm trying to help you all do by sharing with you the information that has been made available to me by the body of our host, by God. This information is not mine. It's being shown to me. Okay. You know, a lot of people, a lot of you, you worship the devil. You don't understand that you worship the devil right now, and you know you think in terms of your intentions. You're not thinking about the actual actions themselves. But there's no such thing as a kingdom of God. A kingdom is a parasitic construct. Okay, there is no such thing as heavenly Father. These are all things that you know what you would call Satan has thrown in the mix to confuse you, to disrupt the operating logic that is naturally born into you. This represents everything that I'm sharing with you right now represents a fraction of what I understand, and I know and I understand in the grand scheme of things, absolutely almost nothing compared to what we're supposed to know. Listen, I'm open to ideas. If you guys understand a better way to share some of this information, get at me, man. Let's talk. Let's turn this into a conversation. Let's make this something that this isn't about a monopoly. This isn't about you know personal benefit or praise or glory. This is about helping as many people as we can, you know, tune to natural order so that you know we can get right and stop going through all of this nonsense. Stop going through all this, you know. Jumping around, hoping that this idea is going to save us, and that idea is going to delay the inevitable collapse of this world order, and that idea, it's none of it's going to work. Natural order is our only option. Structural building blocks that belong to the body of the parasite. Your parasite is programmed to turn on you. If the human race falls, you fall with it. You're not exempt from that. And there's nothing that you can do to try and preserve your, I guess, system of logic or order and operation right now because it's designed to collapse. It's designed to take you with it. So, you know, some of you are going to get upset in me putting this information out here. And, you know, I understand that, especially those of you who represent the structural building blocks of the parasite. And you're going to want to try and neutralize me, but understand that in doing so, you sign your own death certificate. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. My job is simply to share what is being shown to me to the best of my ability and to get out of the way. In this video, I showed you universal math. It's really that simple.